My dear fellow Americans and the rest of the English speakers, I'd like to take this opportunity and introduce you to a dear friend of mine, a famous writer, a world-known philosopher, Mikhail Veller. Please listen to what he has to say. We purposely try to create this program in English so our English-speaking audience would be able to understand where we're coming from. What is the problem that we're faced today? What imminent danger the views of some and actions of some of the American Jews reflecting in today's environment, in our future. Mr. Veller is a world-known philosopher. He is well-read in former Soviet Union and the rest of the world. His works are published in many languages, including English. So please buy his books or get his books and read them. I personally grew up reading his books all of my life, his stories. He's my mentor, and I'm not afraid to say this is somebody who has been teaching me as I've been going through life on many occasions. Again, Mr. Veller is a philosopher who took part in most of the world philosophic forums. He is very, very well known there. He is a post-war child, a boomer. He grew up on a military basis. His grandfather was a Red Army colonel. His father was a lieutenant colonel in the medical corps. So he grew up in a very patriotic, pro-Soviet, communist type of environment. Was himself in the Komsomol, believing in a bright future of the socialist world. But by the time he was 20, he was very disappointed with the invasion of Czechoslovakia and understanding that the entire Bolshevik socialist ideology that is now springing up in the United States is a fake. That's what leads to gulags and suffering, degradation, starvation, and killing fields. His brother and his sister were oppressed, and he himself worked in Siberia, all over the former Soviet Union. His works were not published by the Soviet authorities, and he started to get fame once the Soviet Union fell. So please listen to this program. We worked very hard on it in English language. So please disseminate it among your English-speaking friends, particularly among American Jews. I know that many of them will not like that. They will blame us with anti-Semitism and different kind of tendencies. But the time today is so dangerous for the rest of the world that a lot of it depends on us, how things will turn out to be in the United States. Even though Mr. Veller lives in Estonia, in the city of Tallinn. He was born in Ukraine, but grew up in Russia. He's very concerned. He's very concerned, and his views and his ideas, I think, are very important for the rest of us to understand. I know that it may be some of us who are not used to listening to him, it may be a little bit difficult to understand in the beginning, but I think at the end, it will be very, very clear what he's trying to say. A lot of times I say that when I listen to Mikhail Veller or I read his work, sometimes I don't understand it right away. Sometimes I need to listen to it twice. Sometimes I have to reread it. And I feel like I'm standing on the bridge of a ship and I'm looking in the binoculars and everything is very, very foggy, very, very foggy. And all of a sudden, it all becomes in focus. And I understand the whole world once it became focused at the end. So please, again, please listen, internalize it, and disseminate it. The fight is not over. We have to be responsible. And then let's hope that things will work out. Because if they don't, we have no one to blame, particularly the Jews, the American Jews. We don't need to learn another lesson. But if we haven't learned all the lessons that history and God has taught us, then maybe we will end up having another lesson. So let's hope that will not happen. Again, I can't stress enough the importance of this program. Please watch it. Yura, over and out. Watch.
Greetings to all adequate people, and probably this program will be watched by not so adequate people as well. So, what happened? Why I rushed to Mikhail Veller now? Because I had to get psychological help. I needed psychological help. And a thing happened that I can't explain, and I think that the only person who can put my thoughts back on right track is Veller. What happened is that I was with wounded Israeli soldiers in one of the richest synagogues in Miami. They were telling their story of war, and the people in the audience, hundreds of people, were crying, pitying, praying to God, and all the rest of that stuff. But when I asked the question, I was in my military uniform. When I asked the question to this group of people, if Netanyahu would have listened to Biden and Kamala and given in to their pressure, enormous pressure and threats, not go into Rafah, then today this terrorist Sinwar would be in Egypt, and there would be more of these wounded soldiers from his terror acts. And the killing of Sinwar, the killing of Nasrallah, the killing of Soleimani, al-Baghdadi, and so on and so forth, is only treating the symptoms with the blood of these soldiers, because terrorists are expendable, like ammunition, like tampons, like everything else. They are expendable. Soon others will take their place. This is only a treatment of symptoms. The enemy, however, is in the UN, finances this UNRWA organization. The disease sits in the White House, the one that gives billions of dollars to Iran, who finances it. That's where the cancer is located, where main infection is. That's where it should be treated. And that's when a real commotion started, Mikhail Yosifovich. These people immediately took me for the enemy number one, cause Trump is the spawn of hell. Why? It doesn't matter. That's the main goal, is not to elect him. You must be only for Kamala Harris. I have the feeling that we are not even in the Soviet Union, like in my childhood, with anti-Semitism, but we are rather somewhere in the 1936 in Nazi Germany, where everyone is absolutely brainwashed, and you can't prove that you're not the enemy, even if you have an Iron Cross from World War I. Comrades, I fought for you in a great war. No, it doesn't matter. You're the enemy without a question. So much psychosis, so bizarre that we'd rather die with the communists than live well with the bourgeois. That's what it is. I couldn't help myself, and I was thinking all night about your book, Heretic, how you were attacked then and how you are now. I think that after this program, you will save me psychological pogrom. It will be the same as it was after you published Heretic. We will be accused of anti-Semitism. We will become the enemy, pests. In short, just to destroy us. But I want to tell our listeners that it's very important to learn from you. And we are actually doing this with Mikhail Yosifovich for the American or English-speaking audience. So this will be translated into English, and please spread it among your English-speaking friends, relatives, people with whom you work, serve, study. Please put it out there. I think it is very important, especially now. Mikhail Yosifovich, you do understand my problem? Please help me. Help all of us to understand what is wrong with us, especially American Jews. What kind of a dysfunctional chip we have in our heads. For 1,000 years, we still haven't learned our lesson.
I think that now it's logical to address, first of all, with a few weeks left, just a few days before the U.S. presidential election, first of all, to American voters. And among them, first of all, to the very group of Jewish Democrats who traumatized you at this interesting meeting, where you logically presented everything. I would like first to say a few words about myself to people who know nothing about me. I am a perfect product of the Soviet socialist system. My grandfather ended his career as a colonel, winner of the Order of Lenin and 2 orders of the Red Banner, head of the department at the Leningrad Military Institute. My father was in the army from the age of 17 until he was 56, finished his military service as a lieutenant colonel, was a member of the party from the war years, and I, who grew up in military garrisons, where garrison boys gained Soviet patriotism with "in the air they breathed." Officer, that was the ideal, real man. So, at the age of 14, I was the first in my class to join the Komsomol, and I was absolutely convinced an ardent Komsomol member, because in my mind everything was brought up in such a way that the member of Komsomol was the ideal youth, a man devoted to his country, his people, putting the happiness of the people before himself, much higher than his own. And when in the distant 1966, I entered one of the best universities in the country, Leningrad University, and at that moment the best philological faculty of the world in the Russian department, the Department of Russian Philology of Leningrad University, heirs of the glorious Petrograd, and before that St. Petersburg School. It turned out that in a class of 300 people, and the entire faculty, in total of 1,500 people at the same auditorium, I'm one Jew out of 300, and there were 2 Jews at the faculty. One was me, and the other Arkasha Spichka. That's it. That's when I, for the first time, felt not protected by my parents, for the first time experienced and learned something about anti-Semitism. I was class commissar. I traveled to the toughest student construction sites, Mangishlak in the polar regions. And by the time I was 22, after the troops had entered Czechoslovakia, I learned the proverb, "Who was not a communist at 20, he had no heart, and those who remained a communist at 30, those had no brains." Now the fact is that American Jews of the political left know very well that the leftist movements, which were aimed at the construction of socialism, so far they have not ended up too well, especially for the Jews. Karl Marx, as the originator of scientific communism, although socialism emerged earlier. But then in Russia, when the Bolsheviks won, and a large part of the party leadership consisted of Jews, there were fewer of them everywhere. But the Politburo was the first to have 5 members: Lenin, Trotsky, Kamenev, Zinoviev, and Stalin. After Lenin's death, 4 remained: Trotsky, Kamenev, Zinoviev, and Stalin. That is, 3 Jews and 1 Georgian. So these 4 people decided the fate of the country. So the role of the Jews in building the Soviet Union should not be minimized in any way. The question is, how did it end up? American Jewish Democrats in general, they know that story. They shot Kamenev and Zinoviev. Sverdlov was killed before that. Koltsov, the country's leading journalist, a pseudonym also Jewish, was also shot. A large mass of people were shot. And during the war, the Jewish Anti-Fascist Committee was created, headed by the great artist Mikhail.
You, the old and time-tested Jewish people, enduring persecution and humiliation wherever your sons might be, at whatever latitudes of the world a Jewish heart might beat, listen, side by side with all citizens of our great country, our sons are fighting, partaking with their lives and blood in the great patriotic and liberation war waged by the entire Soviet people. Jewish mother, if you have even an only son, bless him and send him to fight the brown plague. Long live the liberation of all freedom-loving peoples. Into the battle against fascism.
Mikhail's traveled around the states, raised huge amounts of money, and after the war, Mikhail was killed, crashed against the wall of the house by a truck, because he was no longer needed. So, when I graduated from university, I learned that Jews were subject to 3 nots, as they said it then. Not to be fired, not to be accepted, and not to be promoted. That is, all prestigious universities for Jews were closed. All prestigious jobs for Jews were closed. If any individual was introduced somewhere, it is what is called a Jew had to be 3 heads above those who are around him in order for him to be somehow recognized and accepted. What was the result of it all? The Jews left the Soviet Union, and then Russia ended up in a big mess. Of the once 5 million Russian Jewish population, today there are barely 150,000 left in today's Russia. Barely. Today's American Jews know it all. They know it all. They know about anti-Semitism in Poland. They know about anti-Semitic actions, movements in Czechoslovakia with the establishment of a democratic state. They know all this, and moreover, they know all about socialism, the poverty of Cuba. They know how prosperous Venezuela was and then ruined in few years, so that there is nothing and people are fleeing in droves. They know it all. What are they counting on? That it won't be like that in America? America is a great country with a mighty economy, with a proven wise constitution, with a system of checks and balances, and therefore no totalitarian movement, no totalitarian system is possible, and therefore there will simply be equality. There will simply be generalization of just means of production. There will be no exploiters, and everything will be fine and humane. How do they know this? They've been simply told that. Who told them? They were told by the neo-Marxists, the followers of the Frankfurt neo-Marxist, neo-Freudian school, which, when Hitler came to power, all moved to America and thanked it by introducing neo-Marxism, first at all university departments. The program that was developed back in the 20s was to take over the universities, to take over the student body, to take over the media, and that would destroy capitalism from the inside. We tear down all of its morals, all of its values. We tear down the family as an institution. We demolish the work ethic. We demolish the whole system of subordination. We demolish national sovereignty. We demolish everything. And then we'll build a happy future on that clean slate. Most American Jews have a very vague idea of this, but they may have an idea that Jews took an enthusiastic and visible part in the destruction of apartheid in the Republic of South Africa. That is, those who wrote speeches, those who acted as advocates, those who formed the Progressive Party were in charge. They were mostly Jews, and the damn apartheid collapsed, and freedom came, and thousands of white farmers were slaughtered. And there is no more South African science, nor is there any more to come, and crime in the country is at an enormous level. And as a result, the Republic of South Africa sued Israel in the International Court of Justice for its atrocious actions against the unfortunate Palestinian Arabs. It was the Republic of South Africa that initiated it. Thank you, South African Jews. Thanks to the Russian Jews who built communism, and as a result, they were thrown out of everywhere, at least those who were not shot. Thanks a lot. They don't know anything about how fascism arose in Germany. They do not know that in 1917, there was an October coup in Russia. And in 1918, on the first anniversary of November 7th to 8th, There was a revolution in Germany. It took place with Russian money, under Russian leadership, and all communications went through the Russian ambassador. Take 3 guesses about Joff's ethnicity. They do not know that when the Bavarian Republic arose in the same year, and in the spring of 1919 it became the Bavarian Soviet Republic, Kurt Eisner, who stood at the head of it, and after that Soviet Republic, Eugen Leviné and Max Levin. They were all Jews. They had time to establish the early version of KGB. They managed to execute people. They managed to nationalize the banks, and people remembered that. And people didn't want that anymore. And in 1923, the help was already coming from the Soviet Union. It was planned for November 7th to 8th in the Kremlin by the Politburo, again for the anniversary of the Great October coup. It began to be called Revolution in the Soviet Union after 1927, a 10-year anniversary. So it was on November 7th to 8th, 1923, that the communists were feared, hated, and people categorically did not want to establish communist power in Bavaria, because at the same time there were communist speeches in Alsace, in Thuringia, in Hamburg, while in Munich, the National Socialist Party led by Hitler acted primarily to prevent a communist coup. This in no way justifies the National Socialist, criminal, atrocious, horrible party, which should have been eradicated to the ground. Unfortunately, that is not what happened. But one needs to know why it was happening. This is something that was deeply respected by leftist American Jews who don't understand very important things that they need to know. It is the American education system in general. This is one of the aspects of the Western form of existence. People know their specialty, sometimes well, sometimes perfectly, sometimes just exhaustively. But often they have no idea about related branches of knowledge at all. And now I am talking about the fact that a matter in nature has such property that it has a tendency to self-organization. You may not read Ilya Prigozhin. You may not hear the word synergetics. You may not know who Herman Haken is, but you can understand it in a simple way. If you throw some heap somewhere, some will collapse, and the other one will self-organize, as the universe once self-organized. Well, everybody has heard the word evolution. So, social matter is also prone to self-organization. You can refer to William Golding's famous mini-novel, Lord of the Flies. Well, let's say that social processes are not quite correctly described there, but it shows self-organization of a group of boys who simply turn from a bunch of boys into a structure with their bosses and their outcasts. Similarly, any bunch of monkeys, it is instantly structured. There is a leader, there are alpha males, there are beta males, there are females, there are outcasts. And so it is always automatic. What is the result of that? Just as in primitive tribes, i.e., first there was a clan, there was a head of the clan, there were strong men, there were better women and worse women, there were children, and there was coordination of actions. It was the coordination of actions, the ability to act together, the fact that the clan, let's say 25 people, of which 6 were men, was a social system. They survived. They acted together. Similarly, the state differs from the crowd by the fact that in the state, people are coordinated into a system and are capable of unified actions, capable of moving 100,000 masses of armed, trained men to war, capable of building colossal structures like pyramids, and so on. So it is self-organization that leads to the fact that if you take a bunch of people and throw them into wilderness, good, strong, and aggressive workers will stand out. Good but peaceful workers will be weak. Someone will entertain everyone. Someone will be weak and will be laughed at. and so on. And as a result, we always form a social hierarchical pyramid, everywhere and always. The strong are at the top, and they have more and control more. The weak at the bottom, they can do less and have less. But if war breaks out, if the hardest things have to be done, it is the top ones who go ahead. It is like the chivalric baronial warrior class in the Middle Ages. He exploits his peasants, but if it is necessary to fight, he is the first to go to the walls, and he lays down his life defending the weak. Similarly, when the era of free enterprise was established, that is, you can do anything that is not forbidden, you can start any business, you can start sewing boots for your neighbors, and negotiate that they pay you. You can hire an apprentice and negotiate how much you can pay, and so on. When this replaced feudalism, the economy grew sharply, and in politics, the democratic system was established, because everybody had equal rights. Not immediately it was fought for, but nevertheless it happened. Now let's remember where America began, the United States, which was not yet a United State. In 1620, 41 families got off the Mayflower ship at Plymouth Rock, arriving a little bit in the wrong place, and while they were sailing from Europe, they drew up a kind of constitution, an agreement on how they were going to live their lives. That was the first communist community in the United States. The history of the United States began with communism, and after a couple of years, that communism ended. They had a famine, and finally the women said that they would not cook for the common pot and do all the common laundry for the men. They would only do it for their own. And as a result, the famine ended, and the community began to live better, and the economy began to rise. It's a must-read for all Americans, a history of the Plymouth Rock community. So, as for the fact that people themselves absolutely organize themselves into a hierarchical pyramid in their society, because there is a psychological mechanism for this. This is ambition, and this is vanity. This is thirst for power, and this is thirst for profit. This is self-assertion, and this is ego. This is desire to be as good as others. This is desire to have the best sexual partner, and so on. And thanks to this, a very stable pyramid is built, and the places at the top always have to be defended. What is socialism? Socialism says there will be no social pyramid. We put everyone on the same level, and moreover, we give more to those who are weaker and stupider. And if they are lazy, we also give them more, because it is not their fault that they are lazy, because nature created them that way. And thus, society instantly begins to fall apart because the first thing, the strong, smart, brave, and greedy will never give away their good lives. So we need repressive bodies and repressive laws, because socialism is first of all a mechanism at the level of the state. Redistribution of all incomes and central planning of who should produce how much. Second, when people are forbidden under pain of severe punishment to oppose socialism and try to do something in a free economy, private activity is forbidden. Then they begin to assert themselves in this bureaucratic system, because socialism is the domination of bureaucracy. When respected left-wing democratic Jews think that, let's say, a factory will belong to the people, and 10,000 people at this factory will own it, and do everything intelligently, and share the income, it is fair and equal. But you need to appoint a chief production manager. It will be the director, and give him a secretary to record calls and orders, and give him a chauffeur with a car because he needs to travel quickly from place to place. And on top of that, you need a transportation department, a supervisor, a secretary. You need a sales department, very important, where to put your products, and a secretary and assistants. You need a supply service, where to get all the raw materials. And in a few days, you'll have a bureaucratic management machine. Call them officials, dispatchers, managers, executives. It doesn't matter. There will be a control layer. And workers will not be able to control this control layer because this requires special knowledge, skills, and authority. If someone thinks that these managers, starting from a secretary and ending with the director of a huge factory, will be unselfish and will receive the same salary and be satisfied with the same benefits, you should think again, because it contradicts the structure of human nature. It contradicts the natural desire of man to climb higher on the social ladder. And in turn, you create this pyramid. Perhaps they do not know that there have been many attempts in history to create a socialist society. We are not talking about the evangelical communities of the first centuries of our era. They all disappeared without fame or trace. But if we take the centuries of our era, the Middle East, the famous Mazdak rebellion, Mazdakites, and the creation of the state, it was communism, when everyone was given everything equally, including women. It was not only in Iran Shah. But all this ended up with the king looking at it and saying that it needs to be returned back to the old ways, and the whole nation supported him. How many phalanssters there were, and phalanssters in the United States, where they gathered 100, 200 people, built a big building for them, bought all the agricultural equipment, bought a huge ranch for them to work on. They'd work for a year, work for 2 years, and then they'd run the hell away. They didn't want to live as a collective commune, for crying out loud. By the way, Russia, which I can represent, since I am part of that culture, in order not to think that Russians are not smart enough, when Petrashevsky, a famous Democrat of the left, decided to create such a phalanster, such a collective commune in Russia. This is the same Petrashevsky who participated in the case for which Dostoevsky was exiled to penal servitude. The men whom he settled in this estate, in this phalanster, burned down all the buildings the first night and went home, not wasting a year or two. My point is that if you continue to build socialism in America, you will have no hinges and no counterweights, because socialism is supposed to suppress people's natural aspirations for freedom, to freely express their feelings, to freely pursue their interests and goals, as long as you don't step on anybody's head. You don't cross anybody's interest, you don't cause any harm. Do what you want and let people do good for themselves as well. This doesn't work under socialism. Planned redistribution and planned production, and no one dares to question it. Because when there is a society of free economy and free enterprise, which got the unfortunate name of capitalism, socialism always ends up broken and poor, and as a result always ends up in the gulag clamps. That's the thing. And then you'll be gagged. You're already being gagged. What else don't you understand? Is what's between your ears is no longer your brain? Try to say that Biden is a criminal, that Kamala Harris is a complete moron, and that Trump is nothing but a great man, and then we'll see which one of you gets fired from your job first. And there have been many such cases. And try to say that IQ does show how smart or stupid a person is. To say where IQ is not recommended, or simply put it, forbidden when hiring employee or studying at university. And there are such places, and they are not few. Try to say that when a man declares himself a woman, He should be chiseled in the place opposite to his features. And after that, give him at least a few years of correctional labor to remind him who he really is. How long can this nonsense go on? There have never been 60 sexes, 8 or 4. It's all utter nonsense. Try saying it out loud. Try saying it out loud in the appropriate places that there was a rigged or stolen election somewhere. What? You can't say that? Doubts are forbidden. Statements are forbidden. And such things are becoming forbidden to say more and more. Try to say that human intelligence at the level of large numbers, on average, when we take hundreds of thousands, millions of people, directly correlates with the size capacity of the brain. There is no way out. Because animals with small brain have lower intelligence, and animals with larger brain capacity have higher intelligence. And throughout Earth's history, the increase in intelligence was what? It correlated with brain density enlargement. Now try telling me that different races on Earth have different skull volumes and brain masses on average. I am by no means saying who has it better, who has it worse, who has it bigger, who has it smaller. I'm talking about it in the most general form, and there are books like this with a colossal amount of statistical material. You can not only be kicked out of your job, you can be deprived of everything, like they deprived James Watson, the Nobel laureate, a profound old man who was kicked out of the laboratory he created. All of this is called socialism, and you're all going to be kicked out of every place. You ask why? Because under socialism, people start living worse. And prohibition under socialism, I've explained why. There's always more of it. And under socialism, social tension grows in people. And social tension is looking for a way out. It looks for an addressee to which it can cling. It makes an outlet channel for itself. And then they start declaring Jews as the enemy of the people, as it has been for 2,000 years in our human history. And that's when the Jews are kicked out of all the jobs and put on all the blacklists. And that's when the Evian Conference, which was going to be held in 1938, to decide where to put the Jews that Germany wanted to deport beyond its borders. And not a single state accepted them. And that's when the Holocaust takes place and gas chambers and crematoria are built. And it started with the fact that Jews were inclined to socialism in its various forms and thought that it would be better. And after 1945, the defeat of Nazism in World War II, they invented the myth that National Socialism and fascism are right-wing movements, imperialist ideology. Although fascism in translation from Italian means collectivism, and National Socialism, that is the teachings of the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany, are socialist teachings, which differ from socialism in the Soviet version only by the fact that in Soviet Union it was a struggle of classes, and in Germany, the struggle of nationalities, and in Italy, the struggle of Roman culture with other cultures. You have not been told that? No. And in conclusion, for decades you have been lied to and participated in these lies that anti-Semitism comes from the right. And here it is, October 7th, 2023. And here are the Palestinian demonstrations all over the world. And here are anti-Israel demonstrations, rallies, sit-ins, whatever. And suddenly it finally opens the eyes of some people that anti-Semitism is coming from the left, not from the right. That all the right-wing parties support Israel and say that this Arab terrorism must end. And the left-wing parties, the very parties that support the Arabs of Palestine, that justify Muslim terrorism, that say, let's get more Muslims to the West and to the United States. They are the ones who prepare the current Jewish, let's say, pre-pogroms. These are the preliminary massacres. But if you keep pouring water on this mill, then when the real ones start, don't say you weren't warned.
Mikhail Yosifovich, as always, what can I say? As is always, I say, if you asked Veller a question, then sit back and listen to this intelligent man's lesson. Nothing more can be said, so please spread this as much as possible. Listen to Veller. Think what other questions you can ask. Thank you, Mikhail Yosifovich, for your time, for what you have clarified, although I don't even know if I should become an anti-Semite in order not to fight with myself. That way, at least an anti-Semite in me will fight me, a Jew. Well, Mikhail Yosifovich, thank you. It was my honor.
Mr. Tabach, thank you very much for the invitation to your channel, for the opportunity to speak, to say everything I wanted to say, and let's hope that at least someone will get something.
All I can say to our American compatriots and Anglophones in the West, as always, it is a great honor to know you, to listen to you, and to learn from you.
Deeply reciprocated, always felt my inferiority to the men of real men's professions. All the best to you. Thank you. Good day to you.